Everyone, welcome to the 6th edition of SCM Live. In the next half hour or so, we're going to go traipsing through the collector car market. I'm Keith Martin, and I will be your host today. Sports car market has always focused on auction reporting. SCM Live is no different. Today, our focus is on 6 Ferraris that are currently for sale on Bring a Trailer. Our 3 experts have picked 2 cars each to look at. They will explain why they picked these cars, and they will predict what the hammer price will be. At the end, you'll get to vote in 2 polls, one for the car you would most like to have, and second, which one of our experts you think will do the very best. Our winner for the person who comes the closest wins a sure-to-be collectible digital crown at the online Oracle of the Week. Do we have that slide for the online Oracle of the Week? These are last week's final prices. So Alex Cardio was close. Deem failed massively on the Cadillac. Let's go back up a little bit there. Yeah, he also failed at $45,000 on the Mercedes. So our Oracle of the Week, our online Oracle, is Alex Cardio, the BMW specialist and filmmaker. If you'd like to submit questions while we're going on, use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. It says chat, and I will try to ask our panelists your questions in the course of this Zoominar. Also, I suggest you try toggling between speaker view and gallery view, which is in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Just click on it, and it'll flip you back and forth, see which one you like the best. Again, I'd like to thank the team that's made this show possible, Jim Pickering, the managing editor, Chad, our man who's managing the screenshots, and Brian Baker, our IT manager, and also our expert on Japanese cars. Thanking our sponsors, Bruce and Spencer Trainery at Fantasy Junction, Bill Noon at Symbolic Motors, and David and Linda Wilson at Intercity Lines. Here is our subscription special. This is the lowest price you will find for SCM anywhere. If you just go to sportscarmarket.com/Zoom, you can renew your subscription or share one with a friend. All right, if we go on now, we'll look at the panelists today. The always fashionably late Steve Ahlgrim here. And you can, I'm not going to read this all out loud to you. You can see it on the screen. He's been a good friend and our Ferrari expert for what, maybe 15 years now, Steve? 18?
I think so.
You know what the first profile you did for us was?
I don't remember, no.
Okay. Well, it's been great to have you, and I've enjoyed visiting you in your dealership that one time when I was down there, I think for an auction or something, maybe?
You were here for an auction, the Fort Lauderdale auction.
Yeah. Secondly, we've got my good friend Steve Serio, who you can see he has a rather eclectic collection of cars there. I thought, Steve, that you were going to get the Zagato-bodied VW thing that I recently saw.
No, I needed more cylinders than that, and I actually needed something quick in my driveway, so I went with the Aspen.
You know, I think I told you, Steve, that my daughter Alex, who turns 29 this weekend,
oh,
learned
congrats.
how to drive in a VW thing when she was 12 years old. We were the Oregon coast, and you can drive. It's legal to drive on the Oregon beach, on some beaches. And we had the thing, and I folded the windshield down and took the doors off. And she came out, and I said, Alex, you can't reach the pedals. She said, wait. And she ran upstairs and got 2 phone books and pillows and came back and said, I can reach the pedals now. So we drove to the beach, and we spent an hour with her shifting up and down between first and second, chasing seagulls.
Well, the last time we had the thing out was Father's Day as a family, and got caught in a absolutely torrential rainstorm that was unpredicted. And we had the roof completely strapped down and covered in the back. And to say that thing holds water like a boat sinking is unkind, but it got us home.
So did you have a 73 or a 74?
4.
So you had the air induction heater. We had the gasoline heater that set fire to everything we put under the hood resting next to it.
Well, that goes back to the late 50s in Porsche design and some VW options. So they never improved upon it. But if you like traveling with a gas grenade in the front of your car, that's perfectly fine.
You know, you'd have to ask yourself the logic of putting gasoline and a spark plug under the hood of a car. We were driving down to the coast, and my daughter said, "Dad, I think there's smoke coming out from under the dashboard." I said, "No, there's not smoke there." She goes, "Dad, there's smoke." I said, "There's not smoke." She said, "There is smoke." And she said, "You always taught me when you see smoke, pull over." So we pulled over. Yeah, and I left a notebook sitting on top of the heater, and it just set it on fire. So now my good friend Philip Richter, who is responsible for me leaving the world of unpredictable, archaic, overpriced old cars and slipping into kind of the sexy poser world of fully depreciated modern supercars. Thank you, Philip.
You're welcome, Keith.
He writes the Turtle Garage, which is what I like about your blog, Philip, is the variety of things that you address from all parts of the automotive world. He's also a writer. You're the treasurer, right, of the Equestrian Team Foundation.
Yep.
And president of Hollowbook Wealth Management. So let's jump right in here. Philip, here's your one-word description of the market under $50,000. You can back up for a second here, Chad. We're not ready for that. Yeah, go ahead, Philip.
So the market under $50,000 to me at this moment in time is hot, very hot. Cars are moving in the 50,000 under range. There's a lot of buyers of a lot of different marks, of a lot of different years, and somewhat like the real estate market in certain areas where cheaper houses turn much faster than the big multi-million-dollar houses. I think it's very hot.
We were talking to Cece Muldoon today on our Buy, Sell, Hold podcast, and the word that she used was informed and youthful. She said that young people have taken advantage of the resources available with the internet in a way that the older generation never did.
Yeah, I think that's very well said.
Would you think that's, I mean, Steve, don't you think people just research the hell out of things now?
Oh, yeah. My word. Well, first of all, CC Muldoon is one of my favorite people in the car world. She comes from a great family of cars. She's brilliant. She's that dangerous combination of brilliant and beautiful. So she's and a legit car person. I was going to say particular. I think it's piggybacking on Philip. It's hot and it's very particular. People are being wise with their money. It's a robust marketplace, and I think people just getting in under 50 grand. It actually has to do with one of my picks. There's a lot of options, and there's a lot of fun, new or classic options, and people are getting in it. And younger folks, it's a lot of money for younger folks, and they're doing their homework, and they don't make foolish decisions, and they are less impulsive than they used to be.
Steve, what do you say from the market, 50,000 to $250,000? Let's say, Steve Ahlgrim. I'll come back to you, Mr. Serio. Let's go to Steve Ahlgrim.
I think when you get up into that range, it's a little bit thinner as far as the business. We really have to chase after clients when you start getting above $100,000. Up to 100, not a problem. When you get above there, it's a little bit slim for us.
And now, Steve, how about 250 to infinity? Or should I say, but wait, let me rephrase that, 250 to WeatherTech.
Speaking of gifts for their daughter. So, yeah, I agree with Steve. It's slower, although as I was talking, we just sold a Testarossa for $105,000 that we've had for a little while. And a guy just came in and committed to it literally while I shut the door to my office. I think that's a hard market up to 250 and almost up to 500. Once you breach 500, if it's unrepeatable, it's easy to sell. And I think once you get above $1 million and you start to get towards 2 million, same thing. I mean, I had somebody today who gave me a list of things up to $5 million and said, this is what I would like what can I buy? And I just said, well, these 2 or 3 cars, maybe these 2 or 3 cars are over 5 million. And he said, all right, no, not going to go over 5 million. And that's a tough place because there's so many people playing in it. And it sounds nuts, but it goes down to the people with all the money still have all the money right now.
So Steve, you sold on this show and on Bring a Trailer, you had a 250 GT that sold for what, about 5.5?
585.
And that car had over $1 million invested in it, Motion Products and other places?
938, 930, okay. Yeah, something like that.
If you had that same car again, could you resell it for the same price?
That particular car, I could have sold 2 or 3 times. I mean, maybe for 575 and 565 to the various underbidders. There was real activity on the car, but that was unrepeatable. And I felt good about giving it to BAT because unlike a handful of 250 PFs that have failed online recently, the cars that are just cars are tough to sell. And that goes for Astons, Ferraris, Jags, Porsches. It's got to be the top of the food chain example and the most aggressively priced. And if you wanted a 250 PF and wanted to save yourself the 3 years to restore one or 2 years to restore one correctly, it was a relative bargain.
Steve, do you agree with Steve Ahlgrim? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think that what happens nowadays is you're selling a lot of things on the phone. People aren't coming to see it. And as soon as you describe one flaw with the car, they seem to just go away. They don't want to hear anything that's wrong with the car because they seem to have another car out there that they can take a look at. So I find it, the car has to be near perfect to be able to sell a car nowadays.
Yeah, it's going to be without exception. It has to be without exception. Steve's exactly right. The minute you say it needs X, Y, and Z, the guy goes to the next one, unless you have something that can't be duplicated.
Let's jump to the first car here. Philip, these are all cars that are currently for sale on Bring a Trailer. Now, Steve, I'm going to do this to you only one more time, Steve Serio. But my 2 favorite things that Steve has written for us, well, actually 3, counting the new one, talking about the collectible classic or affordable classic Aston that looked like it had been left on the dock with the windows down and the doors open.
In the North Sea. In the North Sea on an oil rig.
One of Steve's first stories for us was he wrote a profile on the A-Team van that was memorable. And then when he reviewed the Mondial Cabriolet, I had one of these that we called it the Celery Special because it was kind of a light metallic green with a peanut butter interior. He described the dash as being having ergonomics designed by Kukla, Fran, and Ollie.
So 60% of the audience right now is going, is that a rap group? And then a few people are giggling. So
Philip, or Steve, I'm sorry, Steve, tell us why you picked this car and what we've got here. Steve Ahlgrim?
Okay, I picked this car because I happen to be one of the few people that kind of like Mondials. When they first came out, I hopped in one of the cars and realized that it was a really nice driving car. It sucks as far as being a collectible car, but in terms of a driving car, it's something that that you can get in, take wherever you want to go. You've got room behind the seats to store some things as necessary. But what would happen is a client would come in and take a look at the car and they would go tell their friend, oh, I'm looking at a Mondial. And the friend would say, oh, no, don't buy one of those. You need to go ahead and buy one of the 2-passenger cars. And what would happen is the guy that was looking for this car, looking at a Mondial, usually had kids. And he wanted something he could take to the T-ball game on Saturday or take the kids with him if he absolutely had to. So he didn't care for the 2-passenger car. It wasn't going to work for him. So we ended up having to convince the guy that if he kept the car for 5 years and sold it for $7,000 less after 5 years than the 2-passenger car, he was getting a lot of enjoyment out of the car. And that was the real reason why he should buy the car. So that's kind of why I picked the Mondial. I always kind of find these cars to be the underdogs.
Can you make these cars not disintegrate electrically?
Yeah, the fuse box, the fuse panel itself on the later cars was they had some wafers, the different panels of wafers that they press together. And when they go bad, you can send it out to some people who now rebuild those. And when they rebuild them, they are pretty much fail safe on that now. The earlier cars had sensors, so that there was a sensor that told you if there were lights was on. There was a sensor that told you if your oil was low. And you had these lights that were in the center console, and those gave a lot of problem. By the time they got to the Mondial T, they'd given up all the sensors, and the car was pretty straightforward. We didn't have much problem with the electronics on the late ones, except for the fuse panel.
Chad, let's see the next slide here.
Steve, did you ever run across some of the electronic? I mean, I'm not making this up. I swear the entire wiring harness was built with just red wires on a car we tried to improve once. Did you ever run across that? Because literally, for every green wire that was meant to be in the schematic, it was red. For every blue one, it was red. And for every yellow one, it was red. So I don't know whether the vino got heavy that day in Maranello, or whether, you know, somebody had just pulled a prank on someone, but God, it was impossible to fix. And it's exactly what happened. The fuse panel disintegrated.
Yeah, I didn't spend much time in the shop, but I've never heard that in terms of wiring issues. The issues pretty much always just came down to the fuse panel and a bad connection, and it would overheat because you had a bad connection.
Steve, I was talking to the guys at Ferrari one time, and they talked about the Mondial. You know, the Mondial, the difficulty is the top is really long. And latching it down can be very difficult if the canvas is cold. And they said when Porsche came out with a power top about this time, that was the end of the Mondial.
Well, when I took a look and put together my list of the good things and the bad things about the Mondial, one of the good things about the Mondial was it wasn't a power top. You didn't have a lot of things that could fail on it. But one of the bad things is it takes a walk around the car to put the top up. You have to do it on one side, walk around the car, then do it on the other side. And then the trick that you have to know is that the latches up in front have an adjustment. They've got a thumb screw that you can move, that if the top is been down for a while and it needs to be stretched, you move this latch all the way to its easiest position, then latch it, and after it stretches a little bit, you take the latch back down, twist the thumb screw, and then you pull it up towards the windshield. It seems like a pretty strange way of doing things, but it's the only way you can get the top up sometimes.
Let's look at the undercarriage here. Should we have one more slide here on this car?
Steve, can I ask you a question? Why, what did the Mondial do wrong that it deserves the reaction that pretty much, you know, 90 out of 100 people have when you roll into a show? They look at it and they just sort of roll their eyes and shake their head. Why does this car have that reputation?
The first thing is it's not a two-passenger Ferrari. I mean, anytime you go to a non-two-passenger Ferrari, they're on a different tier than a two-passenger Ferrari. So people don't pay much attention to it because of that. It's not a terribly attractive car in comparison with other Ferraris. Now, the car is really good looking. If you take it down the street, people will stop at stoplights and compliment you on how good looking the car is. But when you put it in a field of Ferraris, it doesn't really show off the way that it should. So I think that that's the main part why it gets a little bit of nose up at the car, because it's just not the sexy two-passenger car.
I like that Al Pacino drove one in Scent of a Woman because he was blind and he didn't know any better. That sums it up for me.
Steve, where do you peg this car, Steve Ahlgrim?
Where do I take it?
Yeah, what do you think it'll sell for?
Oh, I put this car at $46,500. I think it's probably one of the toughest ones to price because it has the potential to be one of the most valuable Mondials in existence. It's a 5,000-mile car. It's got a great documented history. It came with a huge amount of documents with the car. It came with an extra Ferrari watch, a jacket, and all kinds of things that came along with the car. So as a 5,000-mile car, it should be very valuable. Unfortunately, it has a scrape down the driver's door, a scrape on the vent on the rear fender. It has a small dent in the rear fender, a scrape on the on the wheel well and some marks all the way around the car. And there's actually another scrape on the front panel in front of the headlights. It needs a full service, and this car hasn't been serviced for a long time. It needs to be serviced immediately. This is an engine out service that is probably going to run somewhere close around $8,000. It also needs tires. So there's a big unknown of how much it's going to cost to put this car back in service. And if it is, what the market's going to be at that point. So it's a real tricky one to call. The most expensive one that's ever sold on Bring a Trailer has been $49,000. You had one on Sports Car Market in their Platinum that sold for 51, but that's the most expensive a Mondial's ever sold for. So
Steve,
46.5, and you add in what it's going to take for make ready, that's probably the best price.
Steve, at your dealership, if you had taken this car in at trade in exactly the condition it's in, what would you have hit it at?
A quarter, because of what he just said. He just summed up how you're going to spend on the knowing. Well, first of all, I wouldn't have taken it in given the cosmetic condition, because we're going to have to fix everything or immediately wholesale it. Because to our discussion earlier, there's too many ifs, buts, maybes, ands, and you got to do this and you got to do that. I mean, just with the TR we just sold, the driver's bolster had a little bit of wear on it, and everybody complained about it. And so we've got our leather guy here dealing with that right now. So it's too doggy condition-wise to take in on a trade without really punching the guy who owns it right in the head and saying, subtract what retail is from all the work we have to do to it to make it retail. And Steve, if all that stuff was done and you had it sitting with you and it didn't have the needs paintwork wise and it was serviced and it had tires, does it then become a $55,000 car or more? I mean, it's interesting because you can throw with the paintwork 20 grand at this car.
You know, I also made in my notes that I'm a bad person when it comes to low mile cars. I've never understood the appeal of somebody paying a super premium for a real low mile car. So I could see where you could fix all that up, not describe, because it doesn't have a bad Carfax, you don't describe the paintwork. You take this out to a normal big live auction and somebody might get $75,000 for the car. I couldn't get that much money for it, but I could see somebody doing that. If I had the car, I'd probably price it at $64,900.
You'd be setting a world record, wouldn't you?
Well, but it's a world record car. Where else are you going to find a 5,000 mile car that is extraordinarily well documented?
So let's go to our next car. So this is Steve Serio. What are we looking at here, Steve?
365 GTC. That Fantasy Junction is selling. They've got a sister car to it in red right now as well. They made 168, or if you believe the number, 170 of these. It's one of my favorite 12-cylinder cars. I owned one years ago for a couple of years. I think they are the quiet, understated, better 365 GTC, and I was never better than a 330 GTC. Sorry, although they look very, very, very similar. I was never a fan of the Daytona. I mean, I get the iconic importance of the Daytona when it came out and what it did, but this car was wholly made to win a top speed war that Enzo had lost temporarily. And, you know, it kept going back between Lambo and ISO and Ferrari at that time. And this was a stopgap car. I love them. I think if I could get my old green car back, I'd like to have it. I love this car in white. I love the history of this car. I love the provenance of this car. It's an older restoration, which appeals to me. I don't want something that's brand new and shiny that, I have to worry about the first paint chip. It was always one of my favorite front engine V12s.
Can we see the interior of the car here? There we go.
Yeah, tastefully done. The seats have been redone. I think the door panels have been redone as well. Black with the red trim and the carpets adds to the you know, sort of subtlety of the whole look of the car. Again, the dash is purposeful. It's just one of those things that, as a touring car, I mean, it doesn't qualify for a lot of events other than the Copper State. You could do some, you know, a lot of club things and be happy to drive the car anywhere, you know, with friends and across the country for that matter. So I think it's a real practical car.
Where do you peg this car at, Steve?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, I think Spencer Trenery is a great guy. I think he's done a great job of having it on his website. I think what's going to happen here is the 330s have taken such a punch. They've unfortunately dragged the 365s down with them. I think it's a 6 1/4, 650 car to the right guy who loves white. And I don't think it sells on Bring a Trailer. I think what's going to happen is they're going to get bid up into the 5s. And then Spencer's going to sell the car privately after having a talk with the owner. I think it's a great car. I don't think there's anything wrong with the car. I don't think there's anything wrong with the person selling it. I don't think there's anything wrong with the fantastic presentation. I just think this particular market is soft.
What did these cars peak at? Weren't they close to $1 million?
Yeah, 9 and change.
Yeah.
Yep.
And rightfully so. I mean, when Daytona Coupes were doing the same thing, I know which one I'd rather have. I mean, I just think this is a prettier car. It's understated. I mean, if you had this in your garage along with a DB5, if you had this in your garage along with, you know, another front engine car like a Jag Series 1 Coupe or whatever it is, you'd have a great 2-car collection. It's an interesting car.
Just in my
Did you fall out of your chair? You all right?
I did, yeah. No, it's got that Mercedes air suspension. Steve Ahlgrim, what do you think of this car and the price?
I think that Steve Serio's on the money as far as what the car's worth. I'm not as big a fan of the car as he is. Probably one reason is because I'm fairly short and I have to look through the steering wheel to see out of the car. So it's not a fun car for me to drive. But I'm also my feeling is also when you get into this price range, you're not buying something that you're driving. The beauty of this car is it's a wonder, and a 330 TC is they're wonderful driving cars. But once you start getting into the $6-7 million price, not million, $600,000-700,000 price range, you're not buying a car that you're going to spend a lot of time driving. And for that much money, I'd rather have something that's got a little bit more whiz bang to it. And so I go with the Daytona over this car. But I can't fault him for liking it. It is an attractive car, and they are really fast. They're fun to drive, and they're fast. The transaxle is butter smooth. It's a great driving car, and I would not fault him for liking this. I just happen to like the Daytona better.
So Philip,
It's amazing.
Philip, Philip, you swoon over low miles, 8 Series, 7 Series, SLs. Does anything about this car hit your hot button?
Yeah, I mean, I love this car. We had one at the Turtle Invitational. Howard Keenan brought one last year, and this kind of car I think is also a car that deserves to be seen in person. Pictures don't do it justice. The proportions on it are fantastic. I love the interior. I've never driven one, so I can't opine on the smoothness of the transaxle like Steve can, but I think it's a beautiful car. I've always liked them. Do
you see $600,000 here out of your own pocket?
I think Serio's right. I don't think it's going to sell for the money they want on BAT. I think it's a very narrow buyer. It's going to be the right buyer, and I think the car will find a home. It's just going to be how and when.
I think if you had, Keith, if this car were in the condition of the PF Coupe that I sold, it would set a record. I mean, if you found that, you know, because this is kind of it's not a tweener. It's just a wonderful condition car. I think if you had one that somebody had blown their brains out restoring, they might get $750 for it. It's just, it's one of those things that you got to find somebody who loves white, and that's a controversial color in any Ferrari. I happen to like it. RM's got a white Lusso and a white 275 GTS right now that I wish you had the money to buy because they're both gorgeous cars.
Let's go on to the next car. Here we go. Philip, tell us about this.
So I wanted to do my picks today and for affordable Ferraris that maybe that are more entry level. And so I picked this 328 GTS because it's got some miles on the clock. It's got over 30,000 miles. It's as best as I can tell from the photographs and everything, it's not a late 1988 car, meaning it does not have ABS. It doesn't have the ventilated discs, the convex wheels, all the side view mirrors with the prancing horse, the upgrades that were for the very final cars, which made them, that's why the 89s are better cars. But at the same time, this car could be bought for a good price, you know, given that it's got some miles on it, and someone could enjoy this car and drive it and not just put it away. Look, how many 308, 328s do they make? Like 6.5 million? I don't know. They made 20,000 of these. I don't know. You know, it's like Coke can production numbers on these cars, but they are really, I mean, they are gorgeous to look at. I don't care, putting all price aside and everything. If you look at the F40, it shares the same silhouette. If you look at the 1985 GTO, the same silhouette. And I think the 308, 328s have that same beautiful line of the original Dino from the prior period. And to me, the upgrade to the 328 from the 308, it's just a little bit better looking car. And I kind of throw out a price here on this, which is probably the non-BAT price. But, you know, this car is going to need some work. It's got 30,000+ miles, I think 34,000 miles. I think in a normal world, not on BAT, it should sell in the 55 range. But on BAT, you just sometimes have to hold your nose and watch because the strange outcomes happen. So
Philip,
I don't know, Serio, if you think it would go for more than that.
Just Philip, do you think this car, what's its service situation?
From what I gathered on the listing, it's not been very clearly defined what the history was, but it's going to need work. My view on all these cars, by the way, if you buy a Ferrari of this type and you're not prepared to spend $10,000 to sort it out and get it right,
Yeah,
you're out of your mind buying it.
So Philip, I'd like to go back to your earlier question about the Mondial. And you've just answered that question right here, because part of the reason you buy an exotic car is for the swagger factor. So there's no swagger factor for a Mondial. You have to explain to people and say, oh, look at the horse on the front. That's a Ferrari. They're really famous cars. When you show up in a 328 or a 308, everybody knows that you're in a Ferrari.
It's iconic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Philip, you're dead on money wise. I think the smartest thing, the greatest little tidbit you gave there was you have to be prepared. I used to say to people all the time, anything you buy, save $5 grand, and it is 10 grand on something like this, so that you know you can't blame the last guy. You have to go into it with your eyes open, knowing that it's going to be a little bit of an open checkbook. And the only reason I didn't pick this car was because it was red. I think the 328 compared to any 308 and certainly any 348 was the best built of that period. And you get into the late 88, 89 cars, they're unbelievable cars. And I love the coupes. I was never really crazy about the Targas. I love the coupes. And if this were, a different color, we would be picking the same car. I just the red didn't do anything for me.
Steve, if Steve Ahlgrim, if you had this car in inventory and you had just done a service to it, what would you ask for it?
Well, we've got an 88.5 with similar mileage and inventory. We're asking at the rate at $70,000 for the car. Mm-hmm. I think that the service, as far as the $10,000 number, I think that gets a bit excessive because these cars are really easy to survey. You could go, there isn't much that goes wrong with the car. If somebody does a good PPI, you can bring down the number of what it's going to cost to do the make ready on this car very easily. And the make ready is oftentimes far less than $2,000. I mean, you can do a belt change on one of these cars and a fluid change for under $2,000. And by doing that, you're good to go for a couple more years. So these are not particularly expensive cars to service.
Steve, where's this car going to be in 10 years? Steve Serio.
Right where it is now. I think
Great.
it's amazing for what these sold for new. I think there's always going to be a sweet spot for these. I mean, you think about a 911 from the same period, and I say the same thing. You get an 88, 89 Carrera, and it's a perfect car. It's just maybe it's a coincidence, maybe it's the federal regs, maybe it's the way both cars had evolved before there were model changes. But I think if you put your money in this, or if you put your money in the same year 911, you use it for 10 years, and you assuming you don't put 100,000 miles on it, you're going to get out of it what you get into it, because I think there's always going to be an ask for that seat.
Okay, next slide. You're getting a chance here to subscribe to Sports Car Market in print and digital. It's just $54. You go to sportscarmarket.com/Zoom, and you can use this anytime, and your friends can use it as well. Moving on here. Round two, Steve Ahlgrim. So now we're moving into the modern world here. Steve, tell us about this car and why you picked it.
I picked it because I think that anytime you get into a new Ferrari front engine 12-cylinder car, they're close to the coolest cars you can ever buy. This car is a 800 horsepower car. That at the time it came out, Ferrari thought that it was the highest horsepower normally aspirated engine in any production car. And you add that to all the rest of the stuff that this car has. This particular car has close to $75,000 in options. All the big stuff, the front end lifter, loads of carbon. I mean, it's just got to be, if you are going to walk into a Ferrari dealership and say, I want to buy a car and I want one of your coolest cars, this is what you're going to buy. And it just rings all the bells for me.
Why is this car for sale and it's barely 2 years old?
A couple different reasons. One reason is a lot of these cars are bought by people who are car traders, somebody that's wealthy, that likes to go in and buy a car and get whatever the coolest thing is. If Porsche comes out with a car, they hop out of this and get into a Porsche. The other one is that people buy these to get on the list to get cool Ferraris. If you want to get the next LaFerrari, you have to buy something like this from your dealer to make sure that you stay on the list. So you'll find people buying FFs, you'll find people buying cars like this and not keeping them very long.
What's the MSRP on this?
This car had an MSRP of $418,000.
And how many miles on it?
The mileage is 2,300 miles.
Philip, what's an AMG Black Series? What do they cost?
Well, there's 5 different black, well, now 6 with the new AMG GT. But you know, I think if you're talking about a comparable car to this horsepower, I mean the SLR Black Series, sorry, the SLS Black Series. I mean, those are $400,000-$500,000 right now.
Which would you rather have?
I find that SLS to be a gaudy car. I'd much rather have this.
What do you think, Steve Serio?
I think this is top of the food chain, wonderful car to buy. Let somebody else take a little bit of the depreciation and buy one, just like whoever's going to buy this car. A dear friend of mine had never owned a Ferrari and had been Porsche-centric and Mercedes-centric and new and old. I mean, by that being classic and new cars. This was his first Ferrari, and he got this around the same time I made the commitment to the Aston shooting brake. And we're both driving the cars as much as we can. I think he's enjoying this to no end because it goes like hell. It's real easy to drive. I think they're gorgeous, and I'm not a big fan of anything new Ferrari-wise, really. But any of these cars in an off color like the blue or green or, again, in even white, I think they're fantastic. And I think it's big bang for the buck if you're not the one who orders it with all the gewgaws and spends retail. And if you're not forced to buy this in order to get the new limited production, whatever you want Ferrari, I think it's great second time around. And I almost picked this. So I almost picked this and the 328. So
Steve,
we're in
where
agreement
do you
here.
pay this? What's this car going to sell for?
I'm putting it at 340. There are several on the market. There's more in the market than what you'd ever imagine. A lot of them have virtually no miles on them. They seem to have a price cluster of around $360,000. So I think that this will sell at a price under that. And I'm thinking 340. This has got some really weird tape on it. Somebody's put some red accents on it that needs to be taken off. If I was the dealer, I would have pulled that off before I ever put that car on the market. So I think that that's going to hold some people back, but not much. I mean, the rest of the car shows off really great. It's got good documentation. I think it's going to sell well, but I think that well is going to be 340.
Steve Serio, is BAT the right place for this car?
Well, here's the deal. What I've found with BAT, if there are comps, you do really well. That's going to be the big mystery here. If this car can't be comped, and I think this is the first 812 that's hit it, it may sell. One of the few cars I ever failed with on BAT was my own Aston V8 Vantage. And you couldn't comp the car. It's tough to comp the car even with auction results. And I think it fell short because most of the folks buying on BAT want to know what the last guy did. So it's not going to be the fault of the car or the marketplace.
Okay, let's go on to the next car. Go ahead, Steve.
So, well, I picked this instead of the 328 because of the color and because of what we talked about earlier around the 50,000 price point. I think this is going to be 50,308 because the seller, intimated the 308 was correct already. I'm not the biggest fan of early 308s, but I think as an entry-level first Ferrari for somebody, this particular car has been serviced. The wheels have been upgraded, changed to a better size, in my opinion. The side view mirrors have been changed, although it was a little goofy because they've got electrically controlled mirrors now without the electronics inside. So there's a couple of little things that make it goofy, but it's a low mileage in the mid 20s. It seems to have been serviced. I just happen to like that shape. If I were going to buy one personally, I'd look for the same color combination in an 85. But I think, that you get into a more expensive car. So if you're saying, hey, I got 50 grand to spend, this is my first Ferrari or my first fun car, Keith, you know as well as I do, you can spend 50 grand on a 2002 TII. And at this point, you kind of go, okay, do you buy this or do you buy that?
So say, Steve, this is where I take objection to your choice. Every place you show up with this car that has Ferraris around it, every single person's going to walk by and say, oh, you have a 2-valve injected car.
Yeah.
They're slow. They're yucky to drive. They're they don't have the oomph of the 328 or the quarter valve, and they don't have the fun of the carburetor. So you're already throwing yourself under the bus with this model.
That's fair. And although we were limited to what was available on BAT right now, there's no way I would own this car. As I've had my fair share of Ferraris and exotic cars over the year, but given the fact that we had a pool to pick from, I'd rather have this than the Mondial. I'd rather have this than the red 328. So in that price point, that's where we're going.
Steve, what I'm thinking of when we reach a certain milestone of your relationship with sports car market, your next trophy will actually be a Mondial. And whether we get you an authentic scale model or the real car, the cost may be the same.
Oh, please buy me the model, please, please.
Okay, what do we have next here? Moving. Oh, Steve, what do you pay? What are you going to peg this car at?
50,308.
All right, 50,308.
To be pedantic.
Okay, Philip, fire away.
So this we have here a late series GT4. I first saw one of these when I was 9 years old on Greenwich Avenue in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I thought it was a Lancia, but I walked around and lo and behold, it was a Ferrari. Then publisher Martin bought one and drove it with Bradley from San Francisco back to Portland, and
No,
he is a
Philip, we drove it back to within 102 miles of Portland.
whoops, I forgot that part.
Go ahead.
But I was somehow taken by the car, and much like I said about the other Ferrari, these actually in person look a lot better than they do in photographs. The angular lines. This was the Marcello Gandini design at Bertone. It's a very low price to entry Ferrari, a mid-engine V8. Keith, you know a lot more about these cars than I do. I just sort of liked it, the 308 GT4, and this color, black. It's it's got a lot of miles, obviously over 50,000, which is to be expected. It's had a fender replaced. It's got some battle scars. But I think it's an interesting entry level car, like the 328 was.
Steve Ahlgrim, I'm a little confused here. It looks like it has the federal bumpers that have been pushed in, or Euro bumpers, and it still has the US side marker lights on it. What can you tell me about that? Are you there, Steve?
Yeah, Euro bumpers and the US side markers.
Yeah.
Well, that looks like US bumpers. It's the Series 2 bumpers, which are US. The side marker light looks a little bit high in the side, but it doesn't look that strange to me.
Okay, I know what we did with what I've always done with my 308 GT4s is just drilled a hole in the shock absorber and push the bumper in.
Yeah. That's what a lot of people do. You push it in and then you just weld it with it all the way in.
Yeah, okay. And so, Philip, what do you peg this car at?
So, look, again, I think there's the question of, whether it's going to be a BAT price or a normal market price. But it seems to me something around the 44,000 range would seem like a fair price.
Is this a fabric interior or vinyl? Do you know?
I believe it's vinyl.
Or could be leather, I suppose. What do you think of these cars, Steve Ahlgrim?
Yeah, I like the cars. I've had 4 or 5 of them as personal cars. Anybody that's been around has probably heard the story. My wife had one for an everyday car. I mean, literally, this is what she drove back and forth to work for about 2 years. This is the late series car with the updated air conditioning. It should also have the sunroof. The updated air conditioning is a dramatic improvement. It really makes driving the car a whole lot more fun. I actually was in one this morning, drove one from the shop down to the shop that we're using. And, I thoroughly love the cars. They got a great sound. They've got a great feel. The position where you sit in the car, the front hood just drops out in front of you. And it's an excellent driving car. It's easy to get in and out. The seat's a little bit higher off the ground than what it is in the 308 GTB and GTS. I can't say enough good stuff about it. And what's always interesting is when you see one of these on Bring a Trailer and you look at the comments, there'll be a ton of comments from people who talk about they've had one of these or they have one and they just love the car.
Steve Serio, what do you think? How do these cars work for you?
It works for me as an entry-level car. I think, the biggest problem that suffered, for this poor car over the years was that it came on the heels of the Dino, which was a beautiful car. And this was radical at the time. And look, they've grown on me. Again, I think if you can find a Euro car in an off color with the Euro bumpers, we were talking about sunroof. I prefer a sunroof. You could get a sunroof delete car or a regular roof. And Steve Ahlgrim, have you ever seen a rear seat delete? Because I've seen a couple of those in Europe, and I think that would be the thing to do. If you could find one of those, they're great driving cars. They're much quicker than a 246. Compared to the car I picked, I'd rather have a gray one of these with a red interior or a black interior than an early 308. But again, I was limited to what I could pick, and I happened to like that particular 308 more than I like this, because there's something janky about this car with the steering wheel and the bumpers and the marker lights and the different wheels. There's something that just didn't resonate with me. But I happen to I love them. I mean, if you can find one that hasn't been rusted, you know, I mean, in the Northeast, these cars suffered badly. But I got no problem with these cars. I think they're neat.
Before we move on to the closure here, let me ask each one of the three of you a quick question about this car and the 308, the 2-valve injected car. You've got both cars in front of you on the lawn. You're going to drive one home. Which one's it going to be, Philip? The 308 GT4 or the 308 GTSI?
I would just take the GT4 because it's a little bit different, and it you know, it doesn't have that Magnum PI effect. And to your point about the injection 2-valve.
What about you, Steve Ahlgrim? Which one would you drive home?
No doubt that I would take this one. I'd paint the wheels back to the original configuration. I'd take the steering wheel off. I'd probably get a new faceplate for the speedometer. This car's got an 80-mile-an-hour speedometer. You can replace the faceplate, and then you've got a full speedometer, and then I wouldn't worry about the bumpers. I don't find them to be offensive at all.
Steve Serio, which one do you drive home?
I'd hold my nose stepping into this car a little bit, but I got to agree with these guys. The 308 GT4. I mean, I'd want one in better condition, but this is going to be a better driving car than the car I picked.
Well, you know, Steve, both Steves, the car that I bought from Bruce Trenery, and it had 250,000 miles documented on the car.
Wow.
And all I thought of was the guy that had owned it before me. I thought, what a great life he had. Imagine having a 308 GT4 carbureted, you know, a fast car with a great exhaust on it and driving it that many miles.
Yeah, good for him. Talk about the smart guy in the room.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. What do we have here? All right, here's the polls coming up. And if we can get Brian to bring our poll up. All right, we are cranking, but we're not getting power to the points yet. So let's bring the poll up here.
The poll is up.
The poll is, oh, do I not see it because I'm a host, Brian?
Possibly.
Yeah, it's up. I can see it.
Well, that's interesting because I thought I saw it last week, but that's okay. Everybody gets to vote. And let's see, under view options, I don't know why I don't have the poll. Is everyone done voting? And so we have 2 poll questions. Someone there tell me how we're doing on these polls. Who's the winner? Who is the winner of each poll category?
The 68, 365 won the which car you'd like to have in your garage. And
Yippee!
Steve Serio is considered the closest in price.
Well, Steve, that $20 you sent us is really well served. Thank you.
I'm glad everybody's got a coffee on me today. Thank
Okay,
you,
let's move on here. Let me just check here and see if we have any questions here. There is the only question we have here actually responds to my notion of why would I drive a Macan up the Alcan Highway when I could drive a 356 B or C? And you know, when I just put 2,000 miles on that SL55, and I could have driven my 65 Volvo 122 on the same trip, but I would have had to have left a month earlier. And so
You wouldn't have gotten
the reason I would drive a modern car. What I learned from being with my son in this trip is he doesn't give a crap which car we're in. He just wants to be with his dad and stopping at Burger King's whenever he feels like it and driving along. So the fact that I think, oh, I need to be in an old car that's bouncy and noisy, it doesn't resonate with him. He just wants to be with me hanging out.
He's a smart kid. He's a smart kid.
Okay, anything else here before we wrap it up?
Nothing here. Thank you for having us.
Well, thanks,
Yeah.
all,
Right.
thanks to the three of you. Thanks, John, for joining us. That wraps up this this SCM Live. We have Steve Ahlgrim, Steve Serio, Philip Richter, John Nickus was joining us. And we will be back next week. We'll have a notice going out on Monday as to what our categories will be. You can go to sportscarmarket.com/Zoom. And we wish you all happy bidding on BAT and have a great weekend. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.